Good. So maybe we can come also back to Oliver's themes. I mean, there we can, I think, have a long discussion. Oliver, the 5 scenarios you mentioned, is this already somehow, I don't know, public? Would you like to present it, what those are?
Well, there were probably 8 people, 8 German robotics researchers at this, at this meeting, and we just made that plan. I don't think we have a concrete list of the things we're going to include, but 2 of the things I showed, I would love to include, but that will obviously also depend on other people. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really useful to show that the consequences of picking the right embodiment are far-reaching, and they go through all systems, all components of your system. They simplify everything. So I don't know what the other people will contribute, but if people have ideas where they think that their systems head to head would outperform, today's deep learning system, that would be awesome to collect.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the right strategy. And I think it's hard. So we were also breaking our heads around it. Also, I'm in touch like with the, neuromorphic community people, and they would, I think they have also the same kind of problem that they are, a community doing, their spiking neural networks, but it's very hard for them to come up with a scenario where they can actually, head-to-head beat some, state-of-the-art robotics or deep learning. So that
Well,
yeah,
if we can't find those scenarios, then we should be quiet, right? I mean, then maybe we're wrong. That's also something that we need to consider, right? If we're honest, then that's a possibility. But I think there are scenarios where we can demonstrate tremendous benefits, and somebody just asked me in the chat whether this is not maybe a phenomenon of generally being overloaded with too much information. And that's certainly true, right? In our time, you got to get into the Twitter algorithm or something, right, to get attention. But I also think it's a consequence of Moravec's paradox, ultimately, that we do not appreciate the complexity of things that are automatic within our body. Right? That to us is never impressive. We don't even see it. But it contributes to the simplicity of the result, the rest of the system. So if we just show a component, I think, just showing the hand, for example, that I showed, people think that's cool, but people don't see how it really can affect every aspect of a robotic system, including perception, planning, and so on. And so somehow I think we need to come up with these narratives to show that by injecting notions of embodiment into our system architecture, all components become much simpler.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And this is something that we all need to do together, right? I mean, not one person can do this.
So Oliver, there's been kind of a lot of talk, and I wonder if this is possible, a lot of talk about finding the right benchmarks or right data sets or right kind of grand challenge problems that will allow kind of this head-to-head comparison. I think that would elucidate a lot of things across both fields. I wonder if you or anyone on the panel envisions that as a possibility. Like, so one example that comes to my mind is the Robotarium that was developed at Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
Because these are physical experiments that you could actually run. I think in robotics, it's very difficult to do something like a vision data set, right? We need that interaction with the environment. We need real uncertainty that comes into play through interaction with the environment. So maybe our data set or our challenge problem has to be more of like a shared or combined test bed, similar to the Robotarium.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first step that's necessary is to actually sit down with people from other communities and to agree on a benchmark, right? And this is actually something that I'll be doing in a couple of weeks. We have a meeting scheduled where I'll be sitting down with people that do deep learning, and we'll try to find a benchmark that we can agree upon, which I'm not sure if it's even possible, right? because they will want to emphasize certain aspects. We will want to emphasize certain aspects. And my initial response would just be, well, let's take all of these aspects and compare. And maybe in some aspects, one thing is better. But let's get some empirical data of a fair, real comparison so that we get some answers. But this depends on the other community also wanting to be involved. Right now, they don't have anything to gain from it. They only have to lose.
Okay. Well, I mean, the question is whether we can even make like a fair comparison. So if you have your benchmarks, then I imagine if you consider, all the coupling and interaction through the body, then, the embodied approach will likely win, right? I mean, but then, our approach is intrinsically less general, right? Because of the fact our embodiment works, right? Because you have to take into account the specifics of the morphology and everything. So if we have like 5 concrete benchmarks and then kind of, let's say, imagine the passive dynamic walker, right? So Ted McGeer designed it, and then you don't need a brain, you don't need a motor, you don't need anything. It's just doing it. So taking to the extreme, we might win in any particular benchmark, right? But the question is whether that is convincing to them, because, for them, they have a general approach. They even talk about cross embodiment now, right? So we may have like a gigantic transformer that is going to command anybody.
Yeah. So I'm surprised that you say that their approach is more general. We now really need to talk about what is generality, and this is something that is really missing from our field. Everybody talks about generality and probably mean different things by it. I mean, there is no generality, right? Nothing can do everything. So somehow we need to narrow down what we mean by generality. And for example, this because it's close to my heart, manipulation. You want to be general across object shapes, across, I don't know, the axes you can rotate about, the weight of the object, against directions of gravity. You can list a number of things against which you want to be general. But if, they will say, well, but I want to be general with respect to the actual hand. I want to transfer between different hands and between a parallel jaw gripper and a hand with 12 tentacles. Then I would say, well, okay, great. That is something that I think, I would also use machine learning if I needed to do that. Why don't you go off do that? But why don't we compare on a joined territory, on something that we can both do? Right? So I think if you do that, if you actually say manipulation is a task and you cut off other things, then a good embodiment will make it so general that you have a super easy time beating machine learning methods.
Yes, completely agree. So if you have a great hand, then you can, work with that hand, and then you can generalize across objects and tasks. But it's going to be really hard to switch to a different hand, right? I guess this we agree on. But maybe that's okay.
Even that I don't think so. Even that I don't think so. The notion of virtual fingers. It basically doesn't matter whether you're grasping with 2 opposing fingers or 4 opposing fingers, right? This is effectively the same grasp.
Yeah. So this is the kind of abstraction that I think, the embodied AI community is running on. So we've been recently, trying to, let's say, get the RTX model, to run. And so the way these models work, or if we accept that they work, I mean, we have a hard time getting it to work. But because they have this action space is extremely low dimensional, right? It's for example, X, Y, Z, and then close gripper or open, right?
Yeah,
and that's why they can transfer between pretty much anything, because they don't care, right? The question is how many tasks you can do with this kind of representation, which is kind of so abstract.
Yeah. So we're negotiating now what the contract, what the tasks would be, right? Is it parallel jaw grippers? Then you cannot rotate something in your hand, right, without using the external environment. But yeah, so I think something like this is well, we're gonna do it, but I think it would be helpful if more people did it, if we started thinking about this, and if we started also presenting when we present our work to make those aspects explicit, to compare maybe explicitly to related work, to emphasize the benefits, to emphasize how the consequence of embodiment make other things much simpler. I don't know. I mean, I'm a little bit sad because I really think that our whole field would propel forward if people really fully embrace the power of picking the right embodiment.
Well, I mean, but I think it's intrinsically kind of harder, right? I mean, if you look at evolution, evolution discovers these tweaks, how to solve, tasks with a particular body or particular tasks with a particular body. But that's not how engineers like to work, right? They like something that is much more general and much more, so I think that there might be like intrinsic blocks, that between these approaches are intrinsically different.
Yeah, Mathieu just put in the chat, maybe an option could be to defend that AI is complementary to deep learning rather than the opposite. Yeah, I mean, I think that we don't need to be confrontational, right? I don't think we need to downplay deep learning. I mean, deep learning is a billion-dollar industry, and it's amazing what they have done, and large language models, we're all talking to them all the time. It's crazy. So I don't think we need to be confrontational. But I think the claim from the other side is rather universal, right? I think that deep learning people say this is just going to solve robotics. And maybe it will, but I think we can get there sooner if we don't just rely on deep learning exclusively. So, but I don't know the answer, right? I wanted to raise the question.
Well,
yeah.
I think the important thing is to understand kind of what problems are easier to be approached via approaches, it's classical approaches in robotics or even modern approaches in robotics versus learning and vice versa. I think that differentiation or that delineation could allow us to start working together. So using learning to patch the pieces that are difficult to approach with known tools and vice versa, and not starting from scratch and trying to solve everything with learning, even if we have good approaches and good methods for dealing with that.
Yeah, this is how I started out, thinking, oh, we're going to make a good embodiment, and then that really is going to produce the right representation for learning. But to my disappointment, we found that all the need for learning evaporated, it disappeared. We actually didn't need learning anymore. If we, at least to the few problems that we tackled so far. But that doesn't mean it has to be like this for every problem, right? And in the end, you should use the right tool for the job.
Right.
There's something in the chat. There is a question to you, Stephanie, by Dana Damian. Maybe you can have a look.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Thanks, Dana, for the question. So the question is trust something that can be evaluated instantly in a certain situation, or is this evolved over time or among robots? So very much the second category of evolve over time. And the reason is that these observations of trust, even if we can quantify them and coming from the sensors, they're noisy. So they're not definitely, I mean, of course, it depends on the quality of the sensed information, but for the most part, we consider that these are noisy observations, and you need to collect a lot of them to be able to make any inferences on trust or classification. So that's one reason. And the other reason is that the actual ground truth, the actual trustworthiness of agents can change over time. And so it's something that definitely needs to be monitored and evolved over time. But that's a great question.
And there is also a discussion about swarm behavior that was to Hiroki. Can you also pick that up, Hiroki, maybe for everybody?
Yeah, so I had a hard time tracking both the discussion here and the chat.
Yeah.
But I think the main concern expressed in the sub-thread here is about the kind of the effect of segregation of the different platforms. If you have the different products deployed in the swarm settings, one company may, introduce something behind the scenes so that they going to always prioritize their own products over the other competitors. I think that's a real concern that we should be always thinking about. And the same thing happened, like for mobile phones or social media platform. They are always trying to exclude, users of other products. I think the robotic swarm can be no exception, right? Maybe Tesla vehicles try to work only with Tesla. I never use Tesla product at this point, but yeah, I think that's the valid concern. It may not be like a adversarial attacks. It's really the competition between different manufacturers. Maybe this is also relevant to Stephanie, right? Like a spontaneous segregation of different platforms. Yeah,
Right.
I think that's a valid concern.
Mhm. So actually, if we come back to this embodied AI, the community, so these cross-embodiment data sets, do they make data sets, different robots collecting data, and then they learn from that. And then,
Yeah.
there's the frequency of the robots in those data sets, right? So for example, the arm that is being the most used currently is the Franca Amica Panda, right? Which is like the big. So I think there is a sort of risk there that because these data-driven models will only work for certain robots, we might end up like, people buying only these robots because that's the only ones where these models actually work, which would be
Yeah.
sort of a pity.
Yeah.
So in that, AI would kind of reduce the repertoire of hardware available because the narrow AI will only work with, with those that you were trained on.
Yeah. I think this is actually a very fundamental issue, not only about robotics or embodied intelligence, but in general, our world, in our modern world, is mostly customized for the healthy human beings, right? With the full limbs and the optical sensing, etc., the people who can speak and listen, and any deviation of the physical anatomical feature from that standard model, people with disabilities have a hard time. So it's, I think, fundamentally the same thing. So our data set is heavily biased towards the most popular, body design, so to speak. Yeah. And we want to diversify that.
We've got a couple more minutes left, so more like, I don't know, closing remarks or final questions.
I think, the important thing for any academic community is to have fun, right? So yeah, so if we are so excited about embodied intelligence and do a lot of cool stuff ourselves, and the people working in the AI, the mainstream LLM kind of stuff, they will gonna pay attention to us. Because I know that many people working in the mainstream AI industry, they are getting sick of the current trend. They are looking for something new. So if we are throwing a party, very fun party, they will pay attention to us. That's my personal opinion.
Let's party.
Good.
I'll go get a beer now.
So first party in Berlin.
I'm in Barcelona right now.
Oh, okay. Well, that's also good for party.
That's definitely true.
I think maybe we can party together, and that way there'll be good ideas going across from one domain to the other, which I think is maybe what is needed.
Yeah, so this was actually one comment that I was thinking about making, that we've had 5 virtual meetings, and I think virtual meetings are great because we don't have to travel. But maybe it's time for a meeting in person.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe somebody from the organizers wants to chip in because I think they are planning one in Lausanne.
Yes, actually, I can. So we are having a in-person session of this conference at RoboSoft this year in Lausanne. So it will be on, I think, Sunday. So if like you are there, it would be really nice if you
I'll
want
be
to
there.
join. So that's our first opportunity to have fun and party, I guess. Rolf Ferret should be there, so we will have also people that are pioneers on this, and we can definitely have like amazing discussion on this topic and maybe plan the next party as well.